into the verses today, I think it would be important to look at verses 1 and 2 of Luke 15. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus." Keep that in mind. The sinners and the tax collectors was gathering around together, but they named him Jesus, friend of sinners. Verse 2. "But the Pharisees and teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' As you may see, much to the dismay of the religious leaders, Jesus associated with who was thought to be less than or hopeless. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law was the haters of Jesus because he did not fit the plans or their understanding of the picture of heaven or the picture of the Messiah they thought would come. So when they came to oppose Jesus, he responded by telling them 3 stories about something being lost because they were lost. Today, we'll be looking at the story of the lost son a little deeper. This story reminds me of a personal story of mine. When I wasn't always this well-mannered guy you see before you. I don't know why that's funny. Miss Betty would know. Now, me and my older brother Larry was arguing about something, and we were fighting so long we ended up missing the bus. And we were fighting over this jacket, and because it wasn't cool to let your siblings wear your clothes to school, especially if you go to the same high school. It was just a big no-no. So as we argued over whose jacket it is, we end up missing the bus. And if you know my mom, you know that she don't play that. So as she is washing the dishes, she started yelling at me and my brother because now she's saying we have to walk to school. And me and my teenage brain and my teenage attitude answered with this response: "I'm not walking anywhere. You're going to take me to school." And before I knew it, a bowl was flying towards my head. I ducked it, now there's a hole in the wall. And so I'm already upset that I've been fighting with my brother all day. So I get upset again and tell my mom I'm not going to school and I'm moving out. So I grab my things, jam into my backpack, and walk to the back of the neighborhood to my friend's house because I knew their parent would let me just chill there for the day. Now, as the day go by, I haven't talked to my mom or none of my siblings. But I can tell my mom started missing me because she sends the same brother I was fighting with to come find me. He knew exactly where I was because I go there every day. So I tell him, "Hey Larry, don't say anything because I don't want no one to know where I'm at." As soon as he leaves, my mom pulls up in the car. But she wasn't mad. She was just relieved that I was okay. And the father in the story today, it was just relieved that his son was okay. Now, this story focuses on 3 main characters. And the first person Jesus introduced was the younger son. As he said to the father, "Give me my share of the estate." Now the son's estate would have been 1/3 of the whole property. As the younger brother, he wouldn't have got half, he would have got 1/3. The older brother would have got 2/3. Now in most cases, this would happen after the father dies or when the father is retired from managing the land. Now what is weird here is that the younger son initiated this divide of the estate. This statement shows his impatience, also his disregard for his father's life. In today's terms, he's saying, you are taking too long to die, and I will be better off without you. I just want to be free. It said that the son soon after got all his down the street. He didn't go to a friend's house. It says that he went to a distant country. He wanted out. He wanted freedom. Now, it doesn't say how old this guy was, but when I hear it, I think back to myself again, and I hear him being between the ages of 17 and 26. The ages where we think we know it all, where we go off to college, and trying to be as far away from our parents as possible. You can think back to a time in your life where you was in their shoes telling your mom or dad, I got this, trust me, give me a little space to breathe. Now, I shared with you guys mine earlier, so just take a second and think back to that moment where you were being a rebel and trying to fit yourself in those shoes. Now, I wanted to be right, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And the bad thing about this is, these things can be super, super fun. Well, fun at first. He spent all of his money on a fast life and partying. Everything he's probably worked so hard for is now being washed down the drain for a quick thrill. I wonder how many of us in here today can say, I have been there, been in a place in our lives where the only thing that matters to us is our own personal happiness. As I said before, it can be fun, but only for a little while. The son spent all of his money, and now it's time to find a job. But when he was looking for a job, our family swept over the land. And the only job he could find was working with the pigs. According to Moses' law, pigs was unclean animals. That meant that the pigs could not be eaten or used for sacrifices. To protect them from being defiled, Jews wouldn't even touch pigs. And for a Jew to stoop to feeding pigs would have been a great humiliation. And for this young man to want to eat the same food that the pigs were touching must have been the lowest point of his life. He literally hit rock bottom. We can look back at his life and see the points where he ended up in the pig pen, covered in mud. This is just a reminder that our choices we make directly influence our circumstances. It says that when he came to his senses, he thought to himself, how many of my father's servants have food to spare? The younger son, like many of us, being rebellious and immature, wanted to be free to live as he pleased. And he wanted, but then he had hit rock bottom before he came to his senses. Sometimes it takes great sorrow and tragedy to come to people, to cause people to look to the only one that will help them. Sometimes it takes us to look around and say, I'm covered in mud, I'm knee deep in mud, before we realize we need God to clean us up. So he wanted to, now the younger son, he didn't feel worthy enough to be called a son at this point. He rehearsed his speech, Lord, Father, I'm not worthy to be your son. I will be your servant, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. He rehearsed this speech. And Jesus was using the youngest son in the parable to show a sinner in real life as someone as far as possible from God. He is spiritually starving, trying to find any kind of food that will fill his appetite. But we know there is only one source of food that can feed our soul, and that is Jesus, the bread of life. Now, my question today is, are you trying to live a life on your own, selfishly pushing away your responsibilities and commitments? Now, sometimes when we do this, we hit rock bottom. But it doesn't have to be a bad place when we make it the foundation on which we make our way back to God. Now, the next person we meet is the Father. The Father story is a story of wisdom and patience, the complete opposite of the Son. The father first heard the son's request. He didn't give him a lesson. He didn't fight with him about the property. But we see him allowing the son to make a decision on his own. The son didn't deserve the land, but the father gave it to him freely. Just how our Heavenly Father gives us grace when we don't deserve it, and allow us to make the choices that can lead us into some trouble. But the good news here as well. We see the son come to his senses and make his long journey back home. His dad is out waiting for him to come back, looking for him. And when he sees him, it says the father was so full of compassion that he ran with him with open arms and kissed him. The father wouldn't even listen to his rehearsed speech before the father asked for a robe and sandals. The father had his servants prepare a banquet to celebrate his son's return. Jesus used this banquet to show the younger brother as a sinner entering heaven because he came back to God. Now, in the previous parables, Jesus spoke about the lost coin and the sheep. The seeker actively looked for the coin and the sheep, which could not return by themselves. Now, in this story, the father did not go looking for the son. He watched and he waited. Because he was dealing with a human being with a will of his own. But he was ready to greet his son if he returned. God's love is constant, patient, and welcoming. He was searching for us, but he would not force us to return. In the same way, God waits patiently for us to return to our senses. Jesus is using this image of the Father to show the Pharisees and the teachers of the law a new image of the Father that they were not accustomed to. Now let me tell you about my stepdad, Nick. My stepdad, Nick, is 5'10", and had a bald head since the day I met him. Completely bald. And one day he came home with this photo album of old pictures, and my stepdad came dressed. But as I looked at the picture, I was like, oh, Nick, who is this cool cat? Because he has some nice retro clothes on and a big old afro. And my stepdad was like, hey, that's me. I got some style. You just didn't know. I was like, that's not you. I can't believe it. So nothing my stepdad Nick could say to me could change my mind that was him. And the same thing, in the same way, the Pharisees was hesitant to accept the God of the New Testament. They could not accept God with his big afro. They saw God as a God of law and wrath. But Jesus came to show that God is a God of compassion and of love. Now, how many times have we walked away from God, but God showed compassion? How many times have we blamed God and just wished that he would just leave us alone? But God showed grace. Now, it's okay to come back and take our lumps when we come to our senses and say, I never would have made it this far without you, God, and I'm coming back home. Now, the last person we meet is the older son. We don't see him in the beginning of the story, but as you can imagine, the brothers in the field saying, look at me, I am a good son. My low-life brother is going to regret ever leaving this place, so I'm going to build it up 10 times better than it ever was, and it's all going to be mine, because I am the good son. Now, as he heard the music and the people laughing, he would start to wonder, what is going on? I've been in the field working all day. Nobody came and invite me to the party. Who's here? So he calls his servant over, and his servant tells him, your brother has come back and your dad has killed a fattened calf. Now you know he was so upset. He had to be boiling with anger, because not only was this a shot at his pride, he felt like everything he had done to this point was pointless. It got so bad that in verse 29, it says, I have been slaving for you all these years, and never once did I disobey you. These words shows that the older brother did not do it out of love for the father, but he did it to get the reward at the end. Now, as the younger brother was enslaved to his sin, the older brother was enslaved to his pride and the reward. Now, this should make us think, are we serving God because we love him? Or are we serving God because we're just trying to get to heaven? Now, this is some of us today, the ones who feel like they have done everything right. But our blessing isn't coming fast enough because the people we see messing up day after day, making bad decisions day after day, keep finding themselves in God's favor, keep getting blessed by God, keep having parties and having banquets where the Father is blessing them. And we are out in the field working each and every day, and we are getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. I remember in high school wondering what I have to do to get the attention of my father. Being an honor roll student wasn't enough. Having a full ride to college wasn't enough. I was screaming, look at me, Dad. I'm the good one. So I'm saying, I this, I that. What do I have to do to get my father's attention? At the end of the day, I wasn't the one getting a car or the one getting to chill with him daily because, just like my other siblings, and I became envious of him. Pushing my dad away, saying things like, he never loved me anyway. I guess I have to do something wrong to get your attention. I was the older brother in this story as well. Now, it's so easy for us to fall into that trap. Now, unlike me, the father in the story was a good dad. He was a good father who would leave the party and plead with the son to remind them that your good deeds in the field have not gone unnoticed. Everything I own belongs to you. That you are not forgotten. Now, this part, the brother, were meant to show the Pharisees themselves. Now, the Pharisees called Jesus a friend of sinners. But honestly, they just felt left out. They felt left out that Jesus didn't come to their house. Jesus didn't come to their tree. And they wanted Jesus to themselves. Now, Jesus never intended to exclude the Pharisees and the teachers of the law out of heaven. The invitation was there for everyone to come to the table. But they were too prideful and too headstrong to even accept the invitation of what God was laying before them. Now, I plead to you today, do not let anything keep you from forgiving others or accepting others as well, because this will lead you to miss opportunities to experience the joy and share with others. At the end of the day, we can find ourselves being like the younger brother or the older brother. Now, many newcomers of the church can sometimes feel like the younger brother, making their way back to the Father, and that's okay. Now, saints, soldiers, this is where we have to be careful. We go from being the younger brother in our Christian walk to getting a position in the church, and now our chest is puffed up, and it's so puffed up so high that we can't even celebrate when someone new comes into the church because it's not about us. Now, instead of pouting and making this chapter, making this about us and who we brought in, or if this new person is going to have the right decorum in the church, are they going to act the right way? Are they wearing the uniform properly? I challenge you guys to seek a way to turn this into a discipleship moment, to help them in their walk, to come to the table. Now, the father had enough love for both of his sons. He never neglected neither one of them. But he did not force them to stay home or come to the feast. But the invitation was there. Jesus did not make the sinners and the taxpayers repent. He didn't make them come to him, and he did not make the Pharisees and accept the sinners. It was a choice. He did not ask them, he did not make them join the table. But the invitation was there. Now, the invitation is here for you as well. Regardless where you fall on a spectrum between younger or older brothers. Now you have a choice, even though if you hit rock bottom, to repent and to turn back and to seek the Father. Or we have a choice to come to the party and to rejoice that our brother and sister have made a decision to come back home. The Father said it simply in Luke 15, verse 32. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost, but now he is found. So if anyone here feels like they have been lost and need to find a way back to God the Father, the invitation is yours. Or maybe you had the mindset of the older brother. I can't celebrate because it's not about me. Or I've been working so hard that I feel like I'm enslaved, and I realize that my blessings are not coming fast enough. The invitation is there for you as well. To know that what God has for you is for you. But he wants to use you as a tool